Hello, everyone. This is very much a test. Um, if if you can see me, perhaps you could put a little message in the chat. We have definitely had some issues today, some tech issues. So I am trying once more to see if this is going to work. If it doesn't, we will be back next week as normal, hopefully. But if anyone can see or hear this, we might go 15 minutes late and give this a go. I have the wonderful and ever wise Simon Wise on the phone, seeing whether this is live. Oh, well, there you go. And am I live on that link, Simon? Okay, well, look, let's go for it. Let's go for it. I'm going to see if I can get Danny back on this one, and we'll see what we can do. Okay. All right. Cheers. Bye. Bye. Well, this is fun, everybody. This is really fun. Just give me 1 second because I'm going to see if I can get our lovely guest back, and I'm going to have to do this live, so do bear with me. And let's do that. If you have just joined us today, this is the Franchise Show, but we are having some some technical issues. So if you could bear with me for a little bit of time, and we will be all good. So. Just give me a second. Struggling to multitask now. Well, look, hopefully we will have a lovely guest joining us fairly soon. Until then, I'm going to start again. So, hello everyone. Welcome to the Franchise Show. I hope you are all doing well. Apologies, we are starting a little bit late today. We have had some lovely technical issues, and hopefully those will be sorted out. So where do we normally start when we normally introduce the show and let you know what the show is all about and why we came up with the show. And we came up with a franchise show to give people a safe space for discussion, for debate, and to talk about all things franchising. The franchise show is not just about franchising. The franchise show is about entrepreneurialism. If you're a franchisee, if you're a franchisor, and anything in between. And what we have is a lovely guest each week, and we have a lovely topic each week. And what we do is we encourage everybody who is here to ask questions and to get involved, and we bring people up. This week, the topic is franchise communication, the irony of the topic with all of the technical issues today. But look, we are here, we are live, looking forward to this show. It may be a little bit shorter, and here is Danny back. Danny, my savior today. Well, hopefully, Danny, we are live. We do have a couple of comments. Let's bring them up here because that at least proves that something is working.
Hey.
Oh my goodness. Anyway, so we had just talked about what the premise of the show is, and moved on to the fact that we take a different topic each week and we have a lovely guest. And this week, the guest was going to be Ben Baker, but there was a technical transatlantic time issue on that. And then I messed around with LinkedIn for about 20 minutes and broke it. So that's why we are 15 minutes late. But you know what? That's life, isn't it? So these things happen. It's alive. I'm sure you're all I'm sure you'll all forgive me for this one. We're human, aren't we?
Yes, yes.
So anyway, today we are talking about franchise communication, and we have a wonderful guest. We have Danny Wareham, who has been a guest on the show before. He is a lovely chap. He is a savior today for jumping in at the last moment. And it's always a pleasure to talk to you, Danny. I love our conversations. You're such a seasoned and humble expert on communication, and it's always a pleasure to talk about it. And I think it's such an important topic to discuss. So perhaps you can give your sort of opening thoughts and let people who haven't met you know who you are and what you're about.
We'll do a take two.
For the second time.
Clapper boards. No, so
Oh,
thanks for having me again, Harvey. And I'm glad I can step into the breach and spend some time with you. So for those that don't know me, my name's Danny Wareham. I'm a psychologist that specializes in culture and engagement. So how do you nurture the right behaviors, approaches, decision making that's aligned to your organizational strategy? And obviously, as part of that, communication is the sort of lubricant between people to help them understand the within, the what's in it for me, and how they can contribute to the larger organizational goals, whether that's a traditional kind of corporate, small business, or a franchise model as well. All businesses are people businesses at the end of the day.
Definitely. And I think that that's why this is such an important and repeatable subject matter, because communication is key to any business. And good communication can equal the success of a business, and in the same way that poor communication can contribute towards the failure of a business. And franchising is a business like any other. Franchising is a model for scaling a business, but communication, maybe it's even more key, because you've got more elements of people, and you've got communication from the franchisor to the franchisee and back, communication to the end user, the consumer of whatever that service is, from both the franchisor and the franchisee. So really important. I remember, Danny, last time you were on, your business is called Furgun, isn't it? And I remember you telling me that Furgun is a Hebrew word meaning to take pleasure in somebody else's achievement and success.
Yes.
And what a lovely premise for a business. I always want to help people. It's part of the reason that I wanted to do this LinkedIn Live, because hopefully it helps people think about the types of questions that they could ask, and perhaps inspires some conversation that they might not have. It's not necessarily to answer questions. So how long have you been had your own business, and how has that gone? I know you were in the sort of corporate world before that. How did it compare?
It's a very different beast. It's a very different beast. With everything in life, there are pros and cons to both. In the corporate world, you have safety and security of processes, protocols, people, the regular paycheck, all the P's, all the important P's anyway. When you work for yourself or you run a micro business, you get to choose who you work with. You can be far more diligent and ethical about the choices of clients that you work with. The trade-off is that you have to do lots of other things that you wouldn't have had to do before. You have to do your own kind of prospecting and find clients. You have to do your own chasing clients for payments and what's your lessons learned. And that's a very different mindset to when you just turn up at an office or work remotely and somebody else gives you the work. And so it's been a bit of a mindset change. In terms of what I do, I've done what I've done for the best part of quarter of a century. I was 2 years old when I started, obviously.
Of course.
So my background has always been in employee engagement and cultural change, and I knew what worked, but I didn't know why it worked. So when I left the corporate world and did my master's, it was to give the kind of the academic rigor and the science behind Why do the things that I've seen demonstrably work in the past to drive and change behaviors? What's the kind of theory and the kind of reliability and validity behind that as well? And it's been a really fab journey, learning about myself.
Mm.
Yeah.
Mm. Mm.
And then, of course, when you're a business owner, you'll know this yourself, articulating what it is that you do, what's the pain that you solve, and coming back to communication, how do you have that in a way that resonates with an audience that you want it to resonate with, is also a skill that can be developed too.
That's a fantastic way of looking at it. And I think anyone here that is in that decision-making process of choosing the right franchise partner from either side, right? Communicating that message to your potential franchise partners. If you are a franchisor and you're looking to communicate what it is you do, sometimes it's easier than other times, depending on the service you offer. It's relatively easy for me. We sell coffee.
Well, we may think that's the case, but I'd argue that you don't sell coffee. There will be something else that you do, and coffee is the vehicle for doing that.
Absolutely.
Because otherwise everybody would shop at Walmart. Everybody buy their coffee from there if all you do is buy coffee.
Oh no, of course. Yeah. It's what you do and how you do and that whole journey. So yes, it's complex, I suppose, no matter what the product is.
And it's so easily mistranslated as well. I do an exercise with my clients that's just 5 words to demonstrate the variability in understanding and translating. And the statement, and your listeners and watchers can copy this, is I didn't break the plate. Just 5 words. What does it mean? I didn't break the plate. Okay, well, this time put inflection on a different word. So I didn't break the plate. 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 And I didn't break the plate. All have completely different meanings.
Oh, that's very good. Yeah.
So
Cool.
how you interpret is it's not what you say, it's not what you project, it's not what you convey, it's what's understood. And we have to be aware that what's understood has been wobbled through the prism of their own biases, their own experiences, the state that they're in at the time. And if they think that you've been stubborn and aggressive and dismissive in your previous communication, the confirmation bias will naturally be looking for evidence of that in your future communications. So you have to meet them where they are, not just we sell coffee.
Oh no,
there's more
absolutely.
to it.
Oh, of course, 100%. Just before we continue, just want to recognise a few of the people who have also managed to get over the tech challenges that we've had today and have managed to join us here. So we've got Johnny Joseph from Los Angeles. Johnny's been on the show. And he is a specialist in auditing. So great to have you here. Really looking forward to hearing your thoughts on communication. I know it's really key when you're doing your role. So great to hear some stories and get some questions from you, Johnny. Great to have you here. We have the wonderful and ever wise Simon Wise. He loves that. And great to have you here, Simon. Thanks for your help at the beginning. I was actually on the phone to Simon so that he could let me know that it was live at the beginning.
He's the IT consultant.
He is now, yeah, he is. Slickest start ever to the show today, but it's all good. So great to have you here, Simon. We also have the wonderful Jason Caber from SEO Samba, one of our lovely sponsors. Hopefully they didn't see this one. Great to have you here, Jason, and looking forward to hearing your thoughts on communication as well. We've got Jitin here. Jitin is a regular contributor to the show, has been a guest. So really looking forward to hearing your thoughts on communication as you've gone through your journey. And we've got Malcolm here as well, and he's put congrats on conquering the tech challenges. I didn't give up.
Persevere.
But yes, thanks, Malcolm. We've got a few good questions coming in here. I just want to quickly recognise before we go to Ed's question here. I want to just say hello to Ed, and we're going to come to that question in a minute. Going to do them in some chronological order, something like that. So Simon's put, why do so many businesses struggle with communication? After all, it's a very natural thing to talk to people. Do you think it's because they miss out the thing to do with the ears and listening?
We all speak different languages. I mean, you might think that you speak English and therefore every English speaker speaks the same, but everybody sees the world differently. Everybody processes it differently. And as a result, it means our interpretation of what's being said can be very different. And communication also doesn't happen in a vacuum. You know, if somebody told you they loved you, would you take that at face value? Even if it was your partner? Or would there be other stimuli and other information, other data that assures you that that's a valid piece of information? Of course, love is not that I told you I love you. It's the small, authentic, consistent behavioral things that show it, and they reinforce the validity of that message. When we're talking or sending an email or watching a multimedia video or anything like that, we don't have those other stimuli. So we rely on ourselves, our past experiences, our own biases to put that context in. And as a result, we can all watch the same piece of information and take a completely different viewpoint on it every time.
Absolutely. You're completely right about communication being just so much more than those words, than that language. I mean, you've only got to watch children playing together on holiday. They both speak different languages completely, but they get on and play with each other. The language of play is the same.
There's a great comedy sketch by Billy Connolly who's talking about drunken people from different nationalities only know 4 words, and it's like shibifo is one of the words, shibizi. But that's true. It's the behaviors. If I don't speak Finnish, if I go drinking with somebody who's Finnish and somebody who speaks Afrikaans, we can still have a fantastic night or afternoon or early morning, whatever it is, together, even though we can't communicate in verbal language. In the same way, I can really annoy somebody that speaks exactly the same language, that came from the same estate that I grew up on, that has the same kind of social mobility, same age, same everything.
Yeah, absolutely. No, you're right. Let's go to a comment here by Ed. Ed's put, a lot of people talk about video being the most essential element in communicating a message to prospective franchisors. I like to think it's part of the mix, but where would you rank it in importance against articles, static imagery, photos, graphics on socials, podcasts, live sessions, and newsletters? It's a great question.
It is. There's a lot to unpack as well. So the quick and dirty answer is I wouldn't rank at all. It's a bit like saying, what's the best tool for building a house? Is it a drill? Is it a hammer? Is it a chisel? All of them do slightly different things and can be really great at some things and really terrible at others. A drill is really bad at doing the electrics. A chisel is really bad at plumbing. With communications, it's the same. And good communicators, whether it's an internal comms team or whether it's marketers and advertisers, what they'll do is say, how do we want the audience after the message to either remember or feel? What do we want them to do differently after the message has landed? When they start with that purpose, it's then what's the right approach? What's the right tool for that? And video is really good, particularly in narrative and storytelling, of getting across emotions. But it's really bad if you need to remember specifically what was said, which is why you can remember great films and how they made you feel, but you won't remember the script. On the flip side, writing is really good when you need kind of the cliche of black and white. It can't be misunderstood. But as we've just seen, it can be misunderstood. But it's good for where you need reference material to go back and check. So for things like processes, protocols, to-do lists, things like that, writing might be a better medium than video. But if you want people to feel a certain way about their health and safety processes, then maybe you need an emotional connection. So actually that communication needs both. You need here's the rational written part, and here's the emotive, this is why you shouldn't fall asleep with a cigarette in your hand. So there isn't really it isn't really a ranking. It's about finding what's the right tool for the job.
Right mix as well. Yeah.
What's the job? What are we trying to accomplish? What do we need our audience to do differently afterwards?
I think it's great to look at it in terms of tools for the job, because each job requires a different set of tools, and they're all equally important to get that overall job done. Let's just go to a few other questions here. So we've got a question here from Simon. I find that so many businesses let themselves down in the communication process, particularly in relation to the recruitment of employees. Simon, FranRec is all to do with finding employees for franchise businesses. So he very much understands that challenge of communication. Yeah, it is probably a pain. Yeah, but what do you make of that in terms of that recruitment process and the communication? Everyone's been in that situation where you apply for a job and you're waiting to hear back, or and it can be really frustrating, can't it?
It can, and it's not unique to recruitment, although recruitment is a very emotional stage in an onboarding of an employee or a prospect. Part of the challenge is, and I'm talking amongst friends here, but are we lying to ourselves? A lot of organizations will say, look at us, aren't we fabulous? We do this. This is a difference we make in the world. But the reality of working there day to day is very different. And quite often the job adverts and the job descriptions are focused around that aspirational, we're an amazing company. And the recruiters and the hiring managers are on the front line of translating that message to an audience that they know that as soon as they come through the door, they're going to get a slightly different, dissonant, incongruent experience. And that's why in organizations that don't get that quite right, when they're not telling you about the warts and all, or they're telling you things that are different, that's why you have such high attrition in the original sort of 3 to 6 weeks, because I went on a date with somebody who told me they were a yacht owning millionaire, and then the more little pieces of evidence that they've never even been on a boat, let alone have the money to run one, you go, this isn't for me, I'm off. And in the meantime, your EVP, your employee value proposition, kind of gets bad-mouthed in the marketplace, which puts other people off going for a date with them.
So, yeah, absolutely.
A lot of the work I do is how do you get that delta between what's your talk the talk and what's the walk? How do you get that delta closer? Because the closer they are, the more transparent your organization is. You can have an organization like Twitter who are very clear that if you work here, we want a pound of flesh, you're going to get shouted at, you're going to be sleeping in the office. They've got people queuing around the block to work there because what they say they're about and what they're really about is so aligned. But how many organizations don't have that? How many organizations are Elon Musk, but they pretend to be Richard Branson? They pretend to be something else. So.
That's very true. That's very true. Do you think that, I mean, when you let's take a franchisor, because now I'm thinking about communication in terms of a franchisor trying to communicate what it is they do, and how that's aligned with a potential franchisee. I mean, one of the great things about doing these lives, for anybody who's on this, anybody who's in the audience, or for me doing this each week, people get to know who I am. And it can't be hidden over a long period of time when you do the same thing and you put yourself out there. So it's, I always talk to people about the fact that it's a trust journey. They're trying to get to know who I am, or on a personal basis, to see whether they want to work for quite a long time together on a really important project. What's your take on that, it being a trust journey, and how do you to take people through that communication process?
It's a fab question and really good point that they're wanting to get to know you, Harvey, including sometimes tech doesn't work for you. Okay. So those kind of warts and all, we've kind of grown up to think that, you know, having a mark is bad. And we've completely forgotten about Cindy Crawford. Sometimes it's those little things that are out of the ordinary that might not be perfect that actually make us more humanistic. And organizations peacock, you know, you look at their adverts, you look at whether it's a franchisor or any other business, they tend to shout about when they are at their absolute best. You should be with us because we're number one. You should be with us because we've got the best coffee. You should be with us because we've won all these awards. Okay, but that's not the everyday experience. So tell me, I'm going to be with you every day, not just for the highs. So tell me the realities of it as well. And I will respect you more for doing that because you must be good at what you're doing. So showing a bit of vulnerability actually is a benefit. If you don't tell me, I'm going to see it anyway.
Yeah.
And then I might not agree and I'll pack my bags. So you may as well, if you're wanting to form a relationship, you can't do it based on untruths, even with the best of intentions. No. So how do you create the environment where it's okay for a franchisor to be very clear on, this is what we're great at, this is the difference we make in the world, this is what we want to be famous for, this is the journey we're on. Now, we recognize there's bumps in the road on that journey. This is how we deal with them. We have values, for example, that we all coalesce around common issues. We've got an open policy so you can raise ideas, etc. This is how we deal with stuff when it is a bit of a bumpy ride. So don't expect to come in here plain sailing because we're number one. We're only number one because we work together to get over X, Y, and Z. That is much more of a human connection than look at this monolith that's amazing, you know. McDonald's make a burger in 45 seconds, aren't we amazing? I've worked at McDonald's. I loved it. But I loved it because of the things that were, because of the warts, if you pardon the pun.
No, absolutely. And I think you're right. I mean, very quickly before we go to Jason's point here, I want to go to a point that Simon's made, and he's put a good story gets my attention rather than a statement. Absolutely. I really like this. Moves on to the other show promotion a little bit here, but we're on Thursday. We have franchising brand stories. So I'm going to plug that as well. Same time. Hopefully I'll get the tech right for that. But also, it just makes me think a story has different characters. It has ups and downs. You know, if you just tell people about all of the good stuff, it's not very well balanced as a piece of information. You know, when I tell the story, I give it warts and all. And I think it's important for people to hear the story as it is, because as a franchisor, what you're selling is you're selling the mistakes that you've made so that somebody else doesn't have to make them. So people want to hear about what you did right, but also what you did wrong, how you learned from it, and it makes you a stronger company to deal with, in my view.
It does. And Simon's absolutely right, and the neuroscience backs up on this as well. But it does come with a little bit of a caveat when we're talking about communication. So when we give information, there are two parts of the brain that light up. When we let people create their own narrative by telling them a story, there is more of the brain completely unrelated that lights up, and it allows people to put their own context and imagery and so on. Anybody that's an avid reader will know this, and they'll be frustrated by films that aren't as good as the book because they've been able to add their own context and nuance to the story. So stories are a really powerful way of getting across the general message. You know, everybody who's read Harry Potter has read a different book, but they all know who Harry Potter is.
Yes.
If there is specific messages that you want to get across, so if there's something regulatory, for example, or something about pricing or something that is absolute, then actually storytelling isn't the best tool for the job for that. But it is incredibly powerful in allowing people to create emotional connections with what you're saying. So things like your company vision, things like how we get things done around here, our culture, those are really good when we're talking about when we use stories. The same with customer feedback. Don't tell me you've got a 40% NPS and a 78% CSAT. No, tell me what Mrs. Jones' experience was like, because she was rushing between the school after dropping little Jimmy off, and she got a puncture and she popped in and we did it. I don't need to know what color hair she was. I'll make that up in my story, and that will create a connection between me and that narrative that's far more powerful.
That's fantastic. I'm going to move on here to a point made by Jason of SEO Samba. Danny, how do you measure success when working with a business while improving communication? That's a really good one. How, everyone I think wants to improve their communication. I guess you've got to start with where you're at. And how would you tackle that?
So you've got some fabulous viewers, some great questions coming through.
Sure have.
My
Gives me a job.
my
Read them.
my kind of off the cuff view is I wouldn't measure the communication. The reason you're communicating is not because you want to communicate. It's because you want something to happen with the audience afterwards. So it might be they need to be able to recall a piece of information or feel a certain way about something. It's that you can measure. If we focus on the communication part, you tend to get communication measures. How many people have read it? How many people have liked it? What's the interactions? What's the open rate on the email? None of those things actually help. It's like wanting to go somewhere in the car and focusing on how many miles per gallon I'm getting. You don't actually care about the miles per gallon. You care about the destination of what you're trying to achieve. So how do you measure it? It starts with, what's the point of the communication? I worked with a blue chip client who was publishing 300 communications to their frontline advisors every month. And by time I'd put in place a governance process that started with, what do you need them to do differently? And if they didn't need to do anything differently, the comm didn't go. We reduced it and they were receiving fewer than 20 a month. So we had a massive reduction in it, which meant we weren't overloading people with information. We weren't telling people because it's a vanity project. We've got to tell them about this because the CEO sponsored it. Well, do they need to do anything differently after they've interacted? No, well, they're not telling them. Stick that in a recognition program or stick that somewhere else. So having a strategy around your comms that is based on what do you want the comm to achieve, and then measuring that is the way to go. And that might mean you massively reduce the amount of information that you're giving. And that's fine too.
Absolutely. Let's have a look at a comment here by Johnny. Sometimes communication needs to be something other than positive. Discuss diplomacy is telling someone to go to hell, so they look forward to the trip. Yeah, I mean, we've touched on this, that communication is definitely about a balance of positive and negative things that make up that story, and people understanding both of them and get a rounded picture, and it gives someone confidence that you're giving them all of the picture. Great point there, Johnny. Johnny's also put, England and America are separated by our common English language. Yes, absolutely. It's, the subtle nuances and differences even in those words can make a huge difference to what is communicated.
So Homer Simpson, why am I learning English? I'm never going to England. Yeah.
That's it. Absolutely. I think Ed's come back here just with a response to what you said. Thanks. Didn't think you would rank them. Just thought it would be interesting to see how you might respond to the question. Something I get asked quite often. We have to do video, don't we? Question marks. I produce videos, but I really like how you describe the toolbox. Nice one. Yeah.
Well, I took over a communications team at a major telecoms company back in my corporate days. And the comms team.
You're allowed to say Vodafone. It's okay. It's not BBC.
But I'm sure people will go on my LinkedIn and see it. But the media team, what they'd done is they'd kind of turned themselves into a secretarial department. So even though they were skilled in video production, proper video production, the stakeholders had dictated how they wanted a message to go, the format and everything. So we had like 8-minute long videos that were basically screen captures that had been Frankenstein monster together, and that went out as a communication, and it's 7-minute long video. I will not watch a 7-minute long video if it contained clues to solve my own murder. Right? That's not what it's. But they created this beast and fed it. So when I went in and put in this process to say, what do you want them to do differently after they've engaged with the audience, it allowed me to invest in the people in the team around other communication methods. So we introduced things like animation, infographics, etc. That gave us a better product suite and the control of, if this is what you want to achieve, we're the comms team that will find you the right tool, and we'll be held to account for making sure the message lands. So it's the old Steve Jobs, you don't hire experts to then tell them what to do. The argument that Jason, I think it was Jason, Ed had around, but we need video, that shiny, it's the best way to get a message across is video. So therefore we have to have video for everything, is not necessarily the case. What do you want to achieve? Right. Well, actually, a video might work, or actually this needs to be a face-to-face event, or this needs to be a referenced version controlled document that is stored in a single location rather than emailed around. So you have lots of different versions. So it all comes back to, what are you trying to achieve and what's the right tool for the job?
Yeah, great. No, perfect. Let's have a quick look here. Actually, very quickly, I just want to recognize the fact that we've got Paul Sims here. He's a lovely chap. Great to have him here. And he's put great questions. That's because I didn't ask any yet. Well, look, that's, you know what, sometimes it's about listening. And I do a lot of that. And the questions I ask are normally the wonderful audience questions. I do chuck in a few of my own, but it's great to have you here, Paul. Let's go to a comment here from Simon. Simon's put, Danny, what do you think of chatbots? Now that's a very interesting question for someone who's all about communication, as to how that they fit into that, and do they fit into it, or is this just between human beings?
I've not given it a huge amount of thought, because my experience of chatbots is they're good for kind of fundamental, basic, solve my problem kind of thing. You know, I need to update the billing address or that kind of thing. But there is a tipping point for me personally between, is it a convenience? Because I don't really want the small talk of talking to an advisor about what the weather's like, if I can get away with it, if I just want to change my billing date, versus I need to speak to somebody to explain that there's other stuff going on. And to you, it's just an address change, but to me, it's the end of the world because X, Y, and Z is happening in my life.
Yeah.
And
you only get that by using all of the tools at your disposal with communication, you know, and you can hear and you can see and you can sense some of those things, and what direction someone wants to, or, you know, how concerned they are about something, whether there's other things going on, you know, and all of those little subtle nuances come across when you use those tools. So that's great.
Context is more important than content.
Yeah.
So having the information, that matters, but knowing why you've got the information, what do you want me to do with it, and why does it matter? Those things are far more important.
Yeah, I think chatbots and AI in general, they're another tool at our disposal to help us convey certain pieces of information. Like you say, if the context is correct, they can be useful. You know, we all use spell check and things like that. And as much as it's not completely changing what it is we're saying, it's subtly changing it, and we need to check that it's still, that message is still being communicated in the right way. So I think as the tools get more advanced, we just need to work together on these things to make sure we're delivering the right sort of message. Let's have a look here at a comment from the lovely Jitten. Danny, how do you feel the communication between franchisors and franchisees differs to the communication between franchisees and their customers, considering franchisees are the franchisors' customers? Yeah, that's Exactly. So yeah, that's it. It's there are a sort of we discussed this at the beginning. When you've got the franchise model, you've got the franchisor, you've got the franchisee, and you've got the consuming customer. And those levels there, there's definitely differences in that communication. But how does it differ? So you've got a franchisor talking to a franchisee, or you've got a franchisee talking to a customer. How do you think those two things might differ?
So
It's a tricky one.
at the root of this, there's a couple of ways I can answer this, but at the root of this is, how did you choose your franchisor franchisee relationship? If you've chosen it purely based on something that's maybe commercial, for argument's sake, and it doesn't quite feel right for you, you don't believe in their vision, you don't believe in what they want to be famous for, etc., then your communication can feel like you're just a mouthpiece. So you get defensive language. You've seen this in contact centers, for example, where the bosses have said this is the decision that needs to make, and the team leaders have gone, well, it's not my decision, but it's what they've said I've got to do. And you get those kind of behaviors because they don't believe in the same things that the people that are making the comment believe. If you have a good relationship between the franchisee and franchisor, that is completely different though, because you are on the same hymn sheet. You both are part of that relationship for the same reason, and therefore there's not an incongruence between what they're saying and what you're having to relay. You believe in that because it's the right thing, the right message to the right audience. So really it comes down to that kind of motivation, that motive rather, behind what's the relationship about. And ultimately there shouldn't, in an ideal world, and I am an idealist, in an ideal world there shouldn't be any difference between what a customer hears if they speak to you or a customer hears if they were to speak directly to a franchisor. And the customer doesn't differentiate. If the customer goes to a Costa Coffee, they don't go, oh, it's that Costa Coffee that's a franchise of the big. They just go, that's Costa Coffee.
You can't mention Costa Coffee here.
Oh, okay.
I'm joking.
Yeah, but you get my point. Customers don't differentiate between. You've naturally got a tribal association between franchisor and franchisee. If you've got in-house politics between the two of you and you're not aligned, that's going to play out in behaviors that a customer will see.
Absolutely, and getting that message consistent across those channels as they go down is really important. I know we spoke last time about values turning into culture, and if you can, as a business owner, if you're looking at franchising as your model, and you can translate your own values into a good company culture, that message should, well, that's what you're aiming at, to get that message, whoever someone's speaking to throughout the company. And when I say the company, I'm talking now about a franchisee or a franchisor or anybody who works within that. If somebody, a consumer, comes in and asks a question, they should get a similar level of communication, or that's at least the aim, I suppose. Let's go to we are probably going to start to wind up. We're going on a little bit later because of the slightly tardy start by me. But let's have a look at a comment here. First of all, welcome, Danny. It's great to see you here. It's always lovely to meet you. We met again at the awards recently, so fantastic to have you here. Danny's put, what direct KPIs would better communication bring in the context of franchisor franchisees comms, you reckon? I'd measure successful comms in certain ways, but I'd like to hear Danny's opinion. So we're talking about a franchisor communicating to a franchisee. You know, and that communication process starts right at the beginning when you're trying to deliver your message as to whether the business is right and you're aligned, and it certainly continues along the way to make sure both parties are happy. What's your take on this?
So with me, there's always two parts, as you know. So the first is I'm not a fan of KPIs generally. They are key performance indicators. So they should tell you, they should indicate what you already know. You know, if your reporting was broken, you would still be able to tell who your best people are, your best franchises are. What KPIs do is they give us more granular detail of it, but that comes with more responsibility wrapped up in accountability, so that the KPI becomes the goal rather than what you're really trying to achieve. In the case of comms, I've seen examples of retailers who are measured on open rate on email, and they just get everybody to log on to the till and open and close, and that's it. It's hit the KPI and we look fantastic, but you've not actually delivered the information, the change that you need afterwards. So I know it's a contentious piece, but the KPI bit is a bit, don't get too focused on the measure. What you really want is, are we holistically seeing the behaviors, etc., that we get, that we want, sorry. In the case of the communication, again, it comes back to choosing, for me, it comes back to choosing the right partner, the right franchisee, franchisor. And there are two kind of ends of the spectrum. The first one is kind of the bad neighbor. And I've seen this in contact centers. I've seen it in fintech, in outsource models, which is very similar to franchisers and franchisees, of here's all my rubbish, you deal with it. And that kind of throw it over the fence. Here's a load of communications. I've told you, if you don't read it, that's your fault. I gave you the information and I've got some KPIs in there, so I know you've opened the email, or I know you went to the meeting, or whatever it is. That's not a relationship. And unfortunately that does exist. At the other end is we are partners. You are only successful if I'm successful, and I'm only successful if you're successful. And that changes the way that you communicate anyway. And in that model, it's not about the communication. It's not about whether the email was opened or you attended the meeting, etc. Your KPIs would be different. Your measures of success will be different in that model. As an idealist, that's what I aspire to be. And your outputs will be, what did you want the comm to achieve? I know it's a kind of deja vu repetition, but what do you want the comm to achieve? Measure that and have a feedback loop to say, what did we learn from it? You know, we thought, for argument's sake, we thought doing a video would help. Did you get the behavior, 6 months later, for argument's sake, did people recall the fact that there's a product recall or whatever it is? If they didn't, then we use that next time to improve our processes.
Absolutely.
Not fire and forget, as we have in the first model.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's a great message today, actually, that communication, it's not about measuring that itself. It's about thinking about what you're trying to communicate, and that the communication is the deliverable, not the thing you're.
It's the tool.
Yeah, exactly. It's a tool. Yeah, you got it. And I think that's a great message of today. Look, I think we've taken up a lot of people's time. We are drawing to a close now. So before I thank everyone for being here and let you know, hopefully, that we'll be back next week at the right time, that time, I just wanted, Danny, first of all, to thank you a huge amount for today. I really appreciate it, my friend. But I wanted to give you a chance to let people know what you do, and the best way to get in touch with you if they want to use your services. And while you blatantly promote yourself, I'm going to do
Is that from Costa? I'm quite easy to get hold of, as Harvey has shown today. You can have a B-shaped bat signal go up, and I will appear in your mirror. Or you can say Fergan 5 times, and I appear in your mirror. So I'm a business psychologist. I'm an organizational psychologist. I'm a speaker and a coach as well. And my background is all around, how do you create environments where people can purposely contribute without fear of ridicule or reprimand? It's all about, when are you at your best and how do you play to your strengths? And easiest way to get hold of me is I'm always on LinkedIn, just Danny Wareham. You can also get me at dannywareham.com or firgun.co.uk. So firgun.co.uk. Feel free to connect if you fancy a chat and a coffee that's not Costa. That's fine too. Grab me through LinkedIn.
Oh, that's brilliant. Thank you. Thank you, Danny. That's great. And yes, please, everyone, reach out to Danny. He is a legend on the show, and I'm sure he's going to be returning again very soon. So I'd like to thank everyone today for being here, for bearing with me while I sorted out the issues at the beginning of the show. Determined I was to make it happen, and I'm so glad it did, because as ever, it's been a really enjoyable conversation. I always learn a lot of things, and it's a really pleasurable time to spend. So I want to thank everyone for being here. I want to thank you, Danny, for your time and for very kindly jumping in at the last moment. You are a legend, my friend.
It's been a pleasure for me too, Harvey. Thank you for having me. Hopefully, I've not rambled on. I've put my
Oh,
soapboxes away.
not at
I'm
all.
not
Not
shouting
at
about
all.
values.
It's been brilliant, and as I say, it's a conversation that we can have, I think, on many occasions. So it's fantastic. Next week we have the lovely Tanya McKee, and we're going to be talking about franchise sales funnels and that period of time leading up to making that decision. So it's going to be a really interesting chat. Looking forward to that. That will be next Tuesday, 5:15 GMT, and I think it's still going to be 12:15 Eastern, but we've got some time issues there. So, but anyway, 5:15 GMT next Tuesday. Also, we have an episode of Franchising Brand Stories coming up this Thursday, also at 5:15 GMT. And we have the lovely Graham Duckworth from Driver Hire. So, really looking forward to hearing his story. So that's it. Thank you, everyone, for joining us, and we will see you next